Jeremiah's journey. Jeremiah and his family had experienced a terrible loss. Suddenly, without any warning, his wife Rebecca had died and left him and his 3 children, Sam aged 13, Sophie aged 8, and Chloe aged 3, devastated. The family of bears had been comforted by their Uncle Finbar and their 2 pets, a rabbit called Snowy and a marmalade cat called Ginger. Jeremiah was so shocked he withdrew into himself and often sat in his study for hours at a time, not talking to anyone and just staring out of the window. Sam and Sophie felt incredibly lonely. Jeremiah was so upset he hardly spoke to them. Chloe, the youngest, didn't really understand what was going on, but she was frightened and hung on to Grandma Mary, who had come to support the family. A few weeks later, Uncle Finbar brought Rufus to the house. He was a therapist, and Finbar said that he could help the family. Rufus listened to Jeremiah as he told him, the therapist, how he felt and how much he missed his wife. Rufus also spoke to the children about their mummy and how they felt. Sam learned that when death happens to someone you love, it's important to talk about it, because that's how you learn to live with the sadness. Later, Rufus helped the children to make a memory box of items that reminded them of their mummy. Sophie chose photos of a special holiday, Mummy's scented silk scarf, and a wrapper from her favourite chocolate bar. Months later, on a Monday afternoon, Sophie came back from school and asked Jeremiah, "Where is Mummy?" Jeremiah sat close to her and said, "Sophie, darling, your Mummy isn't really here, but Mummy's spirit is the part of her that matters most, and that was set free. It's as free as the wind." Sophie looked puzzled and asked, "But where is her spirit, Daddy?" Sam and Chloe joined them in the kitchen and were listening carefully. Suddenly Sam said, "Dad, couldn't you go and find Mummy's spirit for us? If you could find her spirit, maybe we could phone her or write her a letter." Jeremiah looked across at Grandma Mary, and they both nodded. They knew that Jeremiah had to find Rebecca's spirit. Grandma Mary offered to care for the children, and Uncle Finbar offered to help Jeremiah. They decided that he would go to work and ask for some time off. The following night, Jeremiah told the children that he'd been given 6 weeks off work, and if they were happy with him going away, he would go and try to find Mummy's spirit. The next morning, Jeremiah took Sam with him to the local travel agent to plan his journey. There were lots of books on show about holidays in the sun, but Jeremiah thought he needed to head for the mountains. He explained his situation to Derek Plum, the travel agent, who listened intently, frowned a little, and then announced with excitement that he had the perfect place. "It must be Nepal," he exclaimed. "You should fly to Kathmandu, where all the mountains are, and from there you can climb Mount Everest, and when you reach the top you can shout out your wife's name and find her spirit." But Jeremiah had never climbed a mountain and was worried that he might not make it to the top. He explained his concerns to Mr. Plum. The agent looked at Jeremiah and then said, "I think you should go and talk to the monks on the Mount of the Great Spirits. They'll know what you should do." 2 days later, Jeremiah said goodbye to the children and flew to Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. The flight was exciting, and the travel agent had arranged for a local guide called Tarek to meet Jeremiah at Nepal airport. After a good night's rest, Jeremiah and his guide started their trek up the rough mountain paths. After 4 days of hard walking, they stopped Tarek pointed up at a large building perched on a mountain ledge. He shouted, "There it is, the Monastery of the Great Spirit. We'll be there by tonight." By the time they reached the monastery, they were very tired. After a bowl of rice, Jeremiah phoned the children. They were all very excited, and as he put the phone down, Jeremiah felt a sense that Rebecca was with him and would have done the same. It was a comforting feeling, and he went straight to bed and had a good night's sleep. The next day, the senior monk, Father Chodak, invited Jeremiah to tell him why he was visiting. Jeremiah told him of Rebecca's death, and how, after a year, his children were still grieving, and how they had sent him in search of his wife's spirit. Sat in a large wooden chair, decorated with ornate markings, the elderly monk said, "We need you to go and speak to Father Dawa, the head of the monastery. He may be able to help." Jeremiah and Tarek followed the monk down a long corridor. The immaculate whitewashed walls caught Jeremiah's attention, as he thought Rebecca would like this too. As they entered a large doorway, they saw an old monk sat on a bench. He stood and ushered the men to sit with him. Father Dawa invited Jeremiah to tell his story for a second time, and he recounted his loss. The old monk listened. Then, after hearing Jeremiah's story, he said, "I don't think I can help you very much. What I can tell you, though, is that your wife is well and happy in the land where the rainbow ends." Jeremiah looked puzzled and said, "The land where the rainbow ends? Where is that?" The monk smiled, leaned forward and said, "It is the place where all lost loved ones are found. A very special place of great happiness, where the sun shines, where the fields are green and everyone is at peace." As the two men chatted, it became clear that the monk did not know where the end of the rainbow was, and that Jeremiah would need to find it himself. He thanked the wise old monk and bowed in respect as he and Tarek left. The two men travelled back down the mountain to Kathmandu and headed for a local cafe to decide their next move. Tarek suggested that they should go and see the local travel agent. To their surprise, the travel shop owner said he had never heard of the land where the rainbow ends. He looked through brochures before shaking his head and telling Jeremiah that he could not help him. Then, as Jeremiah went to leave, the old man suddenly shouted, "Wait, sir, I have an idea. Why don't you hire a balloon? It will take you high above the mountains and you are bound to find a rainbow, then you can follow it." Jeremiah smiled as he turned to look at the travel agent and thought to himself, "What a great idea." The travel agent added, "I have a friend who runs a balloon company." He leaned forward and passed Jeremiah the address on a piece of paper, cheerily waving him goodbye. The balloon shop was just a few streets away. Inside, a man sat on the floor, mending a parachute. He looked up at Jeremiah and said, "Ah, hello, you must be the man who wants to hire a balloon." Jeremiah was fascinated by all the coloured parachutes hanging on the walls of the shop awaiting repair. As he entered, he said, "Hello, I'd like the biggest balloon you have to travel around the world. And could you come with me, please?" The man stopped working and introduced himself as Kieran. He explained, "I have just the balloon for your trip. Just as soon as I've finished mending this parachute, we can be ready. Why don't you and your friend go and buy provisions to last a week? If you provide the food, I won't charge you for the ride." Jeremiah and Tarek hurried to the market to buy water and food for the journey. Then they went back to see Kieran, who said they would be leaving that night. It was 6 p.m. as they lifted off, and Jeremiah gripped the side of the basket tightly, gazing in wonder at the houses below. Kathmandu became smaller and smaller as the balloon climbed into the night sky. Soon they were over the mountains, and Jeremiah looked down at the snow-covered peaks. He looked at the stars shining so brightly and marvelled at the beauty of the night. He then snuggled down into his warm sleeping bag and went to sleep. In the morning, Jeremiah was woken by the heat of the morning sun on his sleeping bag. He got up and looked down from the balloon and said, "We're over India. What an exciting journey this is. Surely along the route we will find a rainbow." Minutes later, Tarek and Kieran shouted excitedly, "There's another balloon!" Sure enough, there in the distance was a bright red balloon. Jeremiah was still eating his breakfast as the balloon came closer. A man stood alone in the basket, waving at them. As they got closer, he shouted that a big storm was coming and warned them to be careful. After breakfast, the skies darkened and the temperature dropped. Suddenly the rain and wind lashed the balloon. It seemed to go on forever. The next day the storm had passed, and Jeremiah realized the wind had blown them hundreds of miles across the ocean to Australia. Then, as the weather improved, a magnificent rainbow appeared on the horizon. Jeremiah was determined to chase it, and as they got closer, the rainbow seemed to be above them. Jeremiah decided that he had to get to the end of the rainbow and picked up the parachute that Kieran had been repairing in his shop. Both Tarek and Kieran understood Jeremiah's need to find the end of the rainbow. They wished him good luck and said their goodbyes as he put the parachute on. At that moment, Jeremiah remembered how Rebecca made him feel that he could do anything, and in his mind he could see her smiling face. Then Jeremiah bravely climbed over the side of the basket and jumped from the balloon. He closed his eyes, feeling the wind sweep against his face, and then he felt a sudden jerk backwards as his parachute opened. Looking up, he saw the wonderful, colourful canopy of the parachute. The sky was a perfect blue colour, while below him was the red expanse of the great sandy desert. The wind was warm on his face, and Jeremiah relaxed and began to enjoy his slow descent to the earth. Anxiously he searched the sky for the rainbow, but it was no longer there. Suddenly he landed with a bump and a thump, which reminded him that he was a bear and not a bird. Seconds later, Jeremiah heard voices. Looking up, he saw a small boy laughing at him. The boy bent down beside him and, chuckling to himself, began to untangle the parachute cord that covered Jeremiah. The little boy said, "G'day, mate. My name's Jojo. Come with me." The boy took Jeremiah by the paw, and they walked off towards a group of wooden huts. Jeremiah had landed in Balgo, a small town on the edge of the great sandy desert and home to a group of Aboriginal people, the original people of Australia. Jeremiah phoned home and told the children how the people of Balgo had looked after him. They had taken him to their huts and given him tea, a plate of berries, and honey from the wild bees. They had not questioned him about who he was, or how it was that he dropped in on them from out of the sky. That night Jeremiah slept under the stars, and felt that Rebecca was with him, and that she had also visited the children. He couldn't work out what made him think that, but he felt her spirit was with him. The following day, Jeremiah was taken to meet the leader of the group, a wise old lady called Nancy. He told her his story, and the lady nodded her head but said nothing. Jeremiah could sense that she understood about grief. He told her that his children had sent him to find Rebecca's spirit and explained how difficult it had been. As he spoke, Jeremiah saw her face changed and realized that she was about to laugh. Puzzled and a little shocked, he stopped speaking and his eyes filled with tears. Immediately the old lady's face was full of concern. She looked at him and quickly said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. It's just we find it so funny that you've come this far to find Rebecca when she's back home in England." Jeremiah began to sob, and Nancy sat beside him and comforted him. She looked at him and said, "Go on, cry. Let it all out." So Jeremiah cried and cried until he thought his tear supply must be exhausted. Just as he was about to wipe his eyes, Nancy pointed at the sky and said, "Jeremiah, look up towards the sun." Slowly Jeremiah raised his head towards the sun, and through his tears he saw the rainbow. There was the rainbow, and beyond that, the sun. He shouted, "Can you see it?" Nancy grinned. "No, but I know that you can. It's your tears. You can see the end of the rainbow only through your tears," she said. Jeremiah looked puzzled, and Nancy laughed. She added, "The end of the rainbow is in your heart, and the other end across the rainbow bridge is where the spirits live, in the land where the rainbow ends." "The land where the rainbow ends is what we Aborigines call the dream time. We believe that the spirits of the people we've loved and lost are all around us, in the earth, in the animals, in the sky and the sea. We can't see them, but we know they're there. The dream time is not just a place, it's the memories of those we love. It's what they taught us, the code we live by. It's what helps us to care for each other." Jeremiah stayed with Nancy and her people for a week. Then he took his plane to Sydney. He laughed to himself as he waited for his flight to London. Now he knew that Rebecca's spirit was with him and the children all the time. It was in the house, in the garden with the children, and in the family pets. He remembered his thoughts about Rebecca being around him and realized that this was her spirit. Jeremiah and his children were so happy to be reunited. Jeremiah told them all about what he'd learned on his journey. Sophie looked thoughtful and said, "So, as long as Mummy is here in my heart and in my head, she's not really gone?" "That's right," agreed her dad. "She'll be a special part of us for as long as we want." "And me too?" chirped Chloe. "Yes, just look at how you love bright colours and painting just like Mummy." Sam looked at his dad searchingly. "And you too, Sam. Mum would be so proud of you, the way you look out for your sisters and all the work you've done in the garden she loves." Sam smiled and remembered the family games of catch the ball. "Ha! Yes, but Mum was a real butterfingers, wasn't she?" They all knew Rebecca was there, because they were there, and wherever they went she would come with them, because she was part of them. He knew too that the rainbow was the bridge, and he pictured Rebecca sliding down it like a child on a water slide, through the waterfall of his tears and right into his heart. They all had a big family bear hug, and Mum's spirit was right there between them, where it had always been. Jeremiah smiled, because suddenly he felt unbelievably happy.